Hi. So I started studying the Bible properly, like full on, in 2019. And it was because I felt God was like, okay, Cynthia, when are you going to get serious with me? Because up till now, you've kind of been flirting with the idea of being in a relationship with me, and let's get serious. Now, as I started it, um, there were some stories that I realized are not what I had been told they were. There were some key stories that really, really resonated with me. And I realized that almost every other sermon I've ever heard on this story is not actually supported by what's in the Bible. And given how much these stories enabled me to really see God's heart, I felt I wanted to document what I understood the Bible to be saying as a result of my own pure Bible study, removing everything else I'd ever been told and supporting it with evidence that is in the Bible. So, story number one, woman at the well. So, in order to understand the woman at the well, I'll give you a brief overview, then I'll start going into it, and then we'll start pulling it apart so that you can understand how this is actually a story about Jesus and you. First things first, this is not a parable. This story occurs in John chapter 4. And yes, the New Testament, in relaying the story of Jesus, talks a lot about parables where Jesus is like, he speaks to people by drawing analogies, so to speak, right? He will tell you about something, but he'll tell it with a kind of like made up story. No, no, no. This one is an actual encounter. So this story, the backdrop to it is Jesus and his disciples were traveling from somewhere to the other. And he left Judea. And if I'm looking, it's because I'm looking at my Bible. Yeah. He left Judea and he was on the way to Galilee, right? I've actually been to Galilee, interesting place. Um, there isn't much left in Galilee in modern day. I don't know why I digress to say that. But anyway, Jesus left Judea and was on his way to Galilee, and he said he had to go through Samaria. That is important because it's actually not necessary. There are ways to bypass Samaria, but Jesus wanted to go through Samaria. This is unusual because the Jews and the Samaritans, or people from Samaria, do not mix. In the Bible, the people from Samaria are referred to as the Samaritans. You know how, in every family, in every town, in every region, in every office group, in everywhere. It's just human nature. There are often people that you go like, oh no, we don't mix with them, right? Yeah, they're not really our type of people. Yeah. Um, for the Jews, that was the Samaritans or Samaritans, right? Do you know, for a long time, every time I heard the story of the Good Samaritan and I heard about people going to Samaria or Jesus going to Samaria, I didn't know it was the same group of people, right? Because we tend to compartmentalize stories in the Bible. But even that story of the Good Samaritan will tell you how much the Jews despised the people from Samaria or the Samaritans, as they were known. Because that story about the Good Samaritan is telling us about this man that was wounded, and then this Jewish priest saw him. The man was lying on the side of the road, half dead. This Jewish priest saw him and was like, like, don't want to dirty my robes, walk past. And then a rabbi walks past and was like, oh, may the Lord bless you and I hope you get better, but not engaging with that, walk past from afar. And then a Samaritan, i.e., a man from Samaria, walks past, picks up this Jew, takes him to an inn, looks after him. And the point was to illustrate how people can have a good heart regardless of where they're from, right? Um, but the other point made by that story is the fact that clearly the Jews considered the Samaritans or people from Samaria beneath them. So that's what that story clearly illustrates, because the story is, look how this man, though being a Samaritan or from Samaria actually acted the most righteous. Okay, so we put a pin on there to tell you how they were viewed. And actually, in terms of the backdrop to this, why the Jews did not mix with the Samaritans and Samaritans. The people of Samaria were a people born of prohibited intermarriage of the Jews with the people in the land that God gave them. A long time ago, when the Jews came out from Egypt and God said, I'm giving you a land, and gave them the land, he said, you will meet people who are already there, who are idol worshippers. Do not intermarry with them, otherwise they'll corrupt you. But then some of these Jewish men, they're looking at some of these women from these idol worshipping places, and these women were looking kind of fine, and they were like, well, I'm sure God won't mind if I make an exception. But God minded. Anyway, they intermarried with them. Therefore, to the very self-righteous Jews, that race that was born out of that was considered unclean, right? Um, and that was the sort of legalistic reason why they felt that people from Samaria or the Samaritans were beneath them. But obviously, clearly, by the time we get to New Testament, God is actually saying, you're not better than them. In fact, I'm looking for them, but I'm jumping ahead. Anyway, so Jesus, a good Jew would typically avoid Samaria because, you don't want to have to walk past the neighborhood that you consider the people are not as good as you. But Jesus goes there. And then the Bible said he sat down by the well and it was noon. Okay, he sat down by the well and it was noon, right? And this woman comes along at that point carrying her water jar. This is where a lot of sermons I've heard about this story become extremely speculative. And like they are trying to make an assumption that just is not there. They say that she must be coming to the well at noon because everyone was talking about her, right? As we would discover that she had been married 5 times. It says that she must be coming to the well at noon because all the other women in the Bible were gossiping about her. So she probably did not want to go and fetch water early in the morning when respectable women typically did. Mm-mm. No, there is another reason, which is actually more plausible given what actually happens in the Bible. Because if everybody was gossiping about this woman, right? And Jesus then says to her, no, you've been married so many times. It wouldn't be anything that she'd be like, oh, how do you know that? You must be the Messiah, right? Therefore, this means that this is not actually the scenario. Okay, but let me carry on with the story. So this woman comes there at noon, and Jesus says he had sent off his disciples, right? Because he was just like, listen, I don't need no witnesses. I don't need people adding their own 2-bit worth and all that. I need to engage with this. You know how when like you see someone that you're interested in, you don't want any drama. You don't want any outside influence. You want to engage with them one-on-one. So he sent his disciples off. And we know that these disciples tended actually to hinder people coming to Jesus a lot of times. Like when they were trying to stop the little child coming to Jesus, and Jesus said, don't stop them. When they were trying to stop the woman whose daughter was possessed with an evil spirit, and Jesus said, Jesus actually engaged with the woman. So we know that these disciples tended to try to gatekeep people from God. Maybe there might also be other people that try to gatekeep, like some churches try to gatekeep people from church even today. I'm not suggesting that every church does. I'm not anti-church, but I am saying that actually a lot of religiousness has actually done more harm and gate kept people from God. Anyway, so Jesus did not want their issues. Jesus sent them off to go and buy food, which, by the way, he didn't need. And I'll tell you why he didn't need it when we get to this point in the story. So he says to the woman, give me a drink, right? And the woman says, how can you, being a Jew, be asking me for a drink? Which says something to me. It must mean that seeing as Jesus did not say, hey, I'm Jesus, I'm Jewish, give me a drink. It must mean that there was something that made it very clear that Jesus was a Jew and therefore different to her. It must mean that the Jewish people and the Samaritans either looked different, which is plausible given the intermarriage way back when. I mean, I'm black, my children are half white. Therefore, without being told, I can tell when I see people who are half white that there is intermarriage, right? It could be that there was that sort of racial difference, or it could be that there was what's it called? What's the word? Dialect, accent different, right? Like I can tell, for example, I'm Black Nigerian. I can tell when I speak to someone who is Ghanaian or South African, I can tell where they're from their accent. Or it may even just be that they dress different. But the point is, they looked different or had a difference that this woman could tell without Jesus needing to say, I'm Jewish. So she automatically stiffens, right? You can see it in her attitude. The man says, give me a drink. She goes, how is it that you, being a Jew, ask me, a Samaritan woman, for a drink? And maybe she didn't waggle her shoulders, but I can sense that she was a bit like that. And Jesus did not continue this conversation. Jesus then instead swerves and says, if you knew who was asking you for a drink, you would ask me for a drink. And then you would never need to come here again and fetch water. Let me ask you, if somebody says that to you, if someone says, give me some water, and you say, why are you asking me for water? And then they say, well, if you knew who was asking you for water, you'd ask me instead for water. And that way you would never need to drink water again. What would be your reaction? Chances are, if we're just talking about water, you'd be like, yeah, right, as if, or that's impossible. No, because Jesus knew what that woman knew, which was that she was not there for water. That's why she immediately went, sir, give me this water so I don't need to keep doing this. Right? This brings me to why that woman was actually there at that time, which was nothing to do with her being gossiped about. In those days, men and women didn't mix, right? Even when they went to the synagogue, they sat separately. Okay, it was considered improper for men and women to be mixing, which means that there were very few places where if you were prospecting for a husband or a wife, you could legitimately go and have a conversation. The well was the most popular and most prominent of that. Where are you getting this from? Is this speculation? No, it's not speculation. And whilst we're also saying this, if you also wanted to meet a man that was not from around where you were from, the well was practically the only place you could meet them. And when you met a man who was not from the same place as you, a man who was a traveler, a sojourner, and they met you and they wanted to marry you, chances are you could then move with them to where they were from. Where am I getting this from? First of all, um, we know that travelers in those days did not go about in early hours or in the dark. In fact, Judges chapter, I think it's chapter 17, talks about this, or no, chapter 18 maybe, talks about this, where there was a man who was about to set off on a journey and they said, no, 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 don't go in the dark. That's not safe. Go during the day. So we know that when they're traveling, to avoid falling into the hand of bandits, they travel during the day. And if you're traveling, going from town to town, you would likely go and get your water or refill your water bag, because they didn't have bottles then. They had like this, like kind of like skin bags. You would go and refill it at the well. So if you were a woman hoping to meet a man for any reason, you were in the market and available, who also you didn't want to be from where you were, you would go to the well. Where am I getting this from? Let's look at it. Abraham, the father of the Jews, when he wanted to get a child, a wife for his only son, he sent Eliezer, his servant, to go. Eliezer was like, God, please tell me how I will know that a woman is the right place. Where did Eliezer go to go meet a woman? The well. Why? Because he knew that that would be where women were likely to come to who would not think it's odd that a stranger was talking to them. That son, Isaac, married Rebecca, who Eliezer found at the well. Then that they had another child, Jacob. They had a child, Jacob. Jacob met his prospective wife at the well, right? Moses met his prospective wife at the well. In fact, the well is the most common place for people to meet wives who are not by marriage, family introduction. Full stop. Therefore, if you are a woman, and also, by the way, in all these cases, when they met the women and they married them, the women then moved from their town where they were to go and follow the man. So, which says to me that if you are a woman who you keep wanting to marry and your marriage keeps lacking something, in order to start afresh, you would keep going to the well, hoping to meet a traveling man so you can move with them somewhere new and start afresh, where no one knew that you had been married so many times. Right? So this woman, and in order to go to a well and look like you're legitimately there, you got to carry some water jar. So this woman did not want to go to the well in early hours because she knew that traveling men were not going to be there in early hours. She was there hoping to meet a man who was traveling who, might start speaking to her. And, next thing you know, she's moving to a new town with him, where she will pretend is her first marriage again for this time, seventh time. So when she says, give me this water, we both know we're not talking about water here, so I don't need to keep coming back here. Jesus says, go call your husband. So he's already hooked her. And then now he wants to land the point. So I'm a different man. So go call your husband. The woman goes, I don't have a husband. Why did you say I don't have a husband? She says, I don't have a husband because she's hoping she can convince this man that she's single. But Jesus was like, actually, you've told the truth because you've been married 5 times and the man you're with right now is not your husband. The woman is like, how on earth do you know that? If everybody already knew this would not have been a big deal for this woman, which clearly proves that this was a secret only this woman knew. That she had been going from town to town to town, reinventing herself. And then here comes this man who she was hoping would be husband number 7. And this man says, you've been married all these times. And she's like, shoot. Sir, who on earth are you? What are you? How do you know this? And he says, you must be the Messiah. Why? Because you know something no one else could possibly have known. You know something which could not be gossip. You did not hear it via gossip. If it was gossip, she would not have been shocked. And what happens next proves it. Why? Because all along she'd been going to the well, carrying her water jar so that she can look like I'm just like a maiden here to fetch water. But if you want to marry me, okay. By the way, let's move to where you're from and we start again. And then she does it again and again and again and again. And all these men keep leaving her with a bigger void. Why? Because deep down, like you or I, we're looking for something that actually no man can give. And the fact that we're looking for it and the fact that our character is such that we're bold enough to look for it means that society keeps judging and assuming that there's something wrong with you. When actually, that thing that society might be misconstruing as a defect is what God Himself made a detour on His journey to come and find you for. Because the woman then drops her water jar. She has no more need for it. Her water jar is, it's her gateway, it's her little passport to this world to pretend like I'm just there to get water. Meanwhile, I'm there to try and hook a man. She drops it and she goes into town. And she said to all the men, come see a man. 2 things which are so profound. All along, throughout Jesus' ministry, so many people have tried to tell the world that He was the Messiah. And Jesus said, not yet. My time has not yet come. Not yet, not yet, not yet. With the mother said, when Jesus' mother said, change the water to wine or do something about the lack of wine, Jesus said, why are you involving me in this? My time has not yet come. Even with the disciples, Jesus did not pick any of his disciples to be the ones that in effect started his church and his gospel ministry. Jesus picked this woman. When she said, you must be the Messiah, or who are you? And he said, I am the Messiah. He confirmed himself to her. And she dropped her water jar and went and called all the men. She was the first one to draw a group of people to Jesus. How could she do that? If she had been, like this kind of shy, extra holy, extra, I don't look a man in the eye, she would not have been able to go and tell all the men about Jesus and say, come see a man who told me all the things I've ever done, which, by the way, shows that the people in the town did not know all the things she had ever done. Because if they all knew all the things she had ever done, they would have been like, yeah, and we all know all the things you've ever done. What's the big deal? But she drew them and they came to Jesus. In fact, it says there that so the people left the city and were coming to him. And it says many Samaritans from that city believed in him and trusted in him because of what the woman said when she testified, he told me all the things I have done. All right. And then as a result, the Samaritans asked Jesus to stay with them for 2 days. Now, meanwhile, the disciples, when they came back, they were surprised to see him talking to a woman and a Samaritan woman at that. And meanwhile, they were like, sir, we brought food. And he was like, no, I'm done. I'm good. I'm not hungry anymore. And they were like, where'd you get food from? Did you have food we didn't know about? And Jesus like, I'm good. I got what I came here for. Jesus came here to find his bride. His bride was that woman. She was the beginning of drawing people to him. It is known that the church is the bride of Jesus. He was done. He came for her. She was done. She'd been looking for him in those 5.5 or 6 marriages, whatever they were. Which says to me that whatever it is that you've been thinking is a flaw or defect in you, that means that you are so hungry or thirsty that you keep looking in all the wrong places, is only a misapplied characteristic that God put in you. And Jesus obviously needed her to be exactly the way she was. Otherwise, she would not have had the boldness to go into town and say to all the men, come and see a man. That blew my mind because even though up till now we are still trying to judge this woman and we're still trying to imply things that do not exist in the Bible about this woman, it says to me that God went out of his way to find her, that God was thirsty for her, that when God said, give me a drink, he was not talking about water. He was saying, I need you. Give me a drink of yourself. And that when this woman herself was coming to that well looking for water, she was looking for the man who could fill her. And she met him in Jesus. You see, I think it's Isaiah 54 verse 5. Don't quote me, but just look for this verse. God said, your maker is your husband. He says it. And if you approach it from that point of view, believe me, and you engage him in all the ways that he says a husband should engage. He says, I'll provide for you. I'm a wall within you. You will not fall. I'll be a wall of fire around you. I'll protect you. Right? He says, I've loved you with an everlasting love. I sing over you. Right? He says, come, I will allure you into the valley of Achor, and I will speak to you tenderly as I did before, and you respond to me in the way you did before, and there in that valley, I'll give you back all of your jewels. He says, your royal diadem in my hand. You're precious unto me. You're the apple of my eye. He's telling you he is your husband. This story changed entirely my understanding of what God wanted from me. He was not judging, he was saying, everything you were frustrated about yourself over, I need it. And if you will entrust it to me, I will use it in the right way. And by the way, I am your husband and I will provide for you. And that has been my experience. And with God as your husband, believe me, he is infallible. In fact, oftentimes marriages get in trouble because women want, or husbands and wives want from their other halves things that only God can. So that's been my experience. And I hope this story challenges you to go and open the Bible and double check everything I've just said, and you will see really that what the Bible says is different to the inference that we had been told about this story before now. I will be back with another story, God willing, that is totally different to the way I had been told it. Have a nice day. God bless you. Bye bye.